Good morning. My name's Paul. I'm an alcoholic. I better not forget it. January 3rd, 90. I understand Mike Carroll is joining us on Zoom. Hi, Mike. Gosh, when I think about 32 years, I think about Bob Cady. Bob is picking up a 59-year chip this year. And he was one of the first old-timers I really sat down and had dinner with in AA. You see, I had been at a noon meeting at the Preston Group, and then Kathleen and I were on our way to Antarctica. We were stopping over in Miami for a couple of days. I went to a noon meeting, and there was this big guy who said, hey, I was in a meeting with you just the other day at Preston Group. And that was Bob Cady. And I think about him because he must have had about 30 to 32 years back then. And when I try to wrap my mind around just all that time, what a gift that was for me. He and I, after the meeting, made plans that we'd have dinner with our wives on Miami Beach, and we were probably sitting down at that table for 3 or 4 hours just talking about AA and gratitude, and what a great experience that was for me with just a couple of years sober. Just a couple of years. I start out my talking about the 3 stages of my drinking. The man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, and the drink takes the man. I love the part about the man takes a drink because that was the time when I had no shame about my heavy drinking. Much of that time I was in Austin. The Armadillo World Headquarters was an ongoing enterprise, and baby, I was there for all of it. I was there for Willie Nelson, the Grateful Dead, Frank Zappa, all of it. And the image from that time was my roommates and I, who had purchased a Christmas tree to decorate our apartment for Christmas. We bought an aluminum tree, but we were sent back at the checkout counter because we had multicolored bulbs. And the cashier said, don't you know you're supposed to have bulbs of all the same color when you have an aluminum tree? And no, we didn't know that. So we had to turn in those bulbs and get just red bulbs. But we forgot to get an angel for the top of the tree, a star for the top of the tree, if you will. So we decorated the tree, and then we realized the absence of the star, and I said, well, that's no problem. So I just finished the Lone Star beer that I was drinking. I inverted it and put it on top of the tree, and it stayed there for weeks. Now, I say that because there was no shame in that kind of heavy drinking. When I was in college, I could make good grades in my classes. I could write really well. And that was just part of living. Well, fast forward a few years. I'd finished graduate school. I was working as a professor in Dallas. I owned a home in southern Denton County, just a suburban tract home. It was one of those neighborhoods where you've got alleys behind the house, no driveway in front of the house. The garages all face the alley. And that's where you put your trash on a Friday morning. So I would always be up at 3 a.m. on Friday morning because I was embarrassed at how many empty cans and bottles there were in my trash. I'm talking about wine bottles, whiskey bottles, beer bottles, all of that. So I wanted to make sure that the garbage man did not think those were mine. Now, I never met the garbage man. I was always at work when he went by, but I cared deeply that he didn't know any of my secrets. So I wouldn't put that garbage bag behind my house. I would put it behind your house. Now, I didn't think I'd ever admit that to anybody, but I come into a room like this and it's funny. It's an experience we all have in one way or another. So that was a stage where the drink takes the drink. I just could not stop drinking. Being ashamed of my drinking wasn't enough. I had to be terrified of my drinking. And that moves us on to the next stage. The drink takes the man. Now, I fast forward a few more years, and I'm living by myself in an apartment house in Las Colinas, a gated apartment house with cable television. And I had this pukey old recliner in which I would fall asleep almost every night because I would drink almost every night. And I'd try to have just enough alcohol to get me through the evening, but I'd wake up a lot of mornings and then finally most mornings, and there were a lot more cans and bottles around my pukey old recliner than there had been when I started drinking the night before. So I thought about that for a while, and there was only really one way. Well, there were two ways that could have happened. One way is that you guys were breaking into my apartment in the middle of the night and depositing your empties there. But what's more likely is that I was driving from Las Colinas into Dallas and back to buy alcohol, drinking it and having no memory the next day of having done that. Truly blackout drinking. Now that's terrifying because I was doing all of that without any consciousness of it. And that meant that any morning I might wake up in the hospital or a jail cell. I might have killed one of you. I might have killed one of your kids. I might have killed some poor cop who had just stopped somebody else beside the highway. It was just a matter of fortune that nothing catastrophic happened during that period. I think of the Phil Oakes song, "There but for fortune go you or I," and that's truly where I was. So that was terrifying to wake up that way. And that was when I started trying to find AA. And I called them up and said, look, I think I'm ready to go to a meeting. And they said, well, there's one down the street from you, the Gift of Sobriety. They have a meeting at 6 o'clock every day. We suggest that you get there a few minutes early and introduce yourself to someone, and they'll explain to you how it works. So I would do that. I would drive over there at about 5:45. I'd watch all of you get out of your cars and hug each other and laugh, and then I'd start up my car and go to the liquor store. But at least I was going to AA, right? Yeah, maybe some of you have done that. So eventually I went in. It was about December 12, 89, and a week later I drank for my birthday. A week after, I was 37. A week after that I drank for Christmas. A week after that I drank at New Year's, and on January 3rd, I came in and established a sobriety date. Now, I got a sponsor right away. My first sponsor was a man named Vic, and he was a wonderful guy. I did not persist at the gift of sobriety. I very quickly found Preston Group, especially the men's meeting at Preston Group. So I was at Preston Group at 8:30 every morning, and I could do that before teaching my classes, and it was really wonderful. And those were the females that my wife saved me from. So but I remember when I was coming up on a year, my sponsor got me to go back to the gift of sobriety to pick up my chip. And I was happy to do that. And he told me afterwards that some of the guys at the gift of sobriety were really surprised to see me up there picking up my 1-year chip, because they had thought I was too smart to make it in AA. And I found out, some people say 3 years later, I think it was more like 5. That is not a compliment in Alcoholics Anonymous. See, I came in here just wanting to find parallels to the 12 steps in ancient Greek thinking. I was really digging into all of the paradoxes in this program. And there is a story in the first edition, The Professor and the Paradox. I thought it was my place to restore life to its original complexity. Well, I have found out over 30 years that I'm here to say that this program can be simple. It can be really simple. It can be unbelievably simple. And I make that case through an analogy to the X-ray welders. Now let me explain what an X-ray welder is. When I had graduated from college, I had this wonderful summer job just making a boatload of money in Houston in petroleum-related construction. And this was hot, hot work. It was miserable work, scrambling around on top of these rigs that just baked in the sun all day. And the more seasoned workers, they had figured out how to do that part of their job before lunch and just sent their helpers, people like me, up there on those big skids to do that in the afternoon when it was just blazing hot. Now, something about that company, we made skids that sat on top of oil wells and converted the natural gas coming out of the wells into gasoline. So they were little gasoline plants. Now the company, in inaugurating this new idea that was in its own way revolutionizing petroleum engineering, had gotten off to a really lucky start because this equipment operated under very high pressure. And one day, one of these rigs was being installed and the pressure was pushed up to the maximum, and one of the welds on one of the pipes burst, and it killed an engineer. I mean, this was one of the founders of the company. So from that point on, that company made a commitment that every weld would be secure. Now, this is where the X-ray welders come in. X-ray welders do not weld with X-rays coming out of their fingertips. This is not science fiction. But these are welders who can pass an X-ray test where you weld two pipes together and not even an X-ray can find where those pipes originally joined together. That's how good the weld is. And not just anybody who's been to welding school can do that. So management had tried to find people like that, but they wouldn't work under ordinary circumstances. The rest of us had to be there at 7 a.m. every day. And the X-ray welders were saying, no, we'll just kind of roll in when we roll in. 9, 9:30, 10. You have all of our work lined up for the day, and we're just going to hit the road when we're done. We're not going to hang around until that whistle goes off at 6 in the afternoon. We'll be out of here. And management discovered that they needed to make a bargain with those X-ray welders. So these guys became the gods of the oil patch. There wasn't anything they could do with wrong, and these guys would blow in mid-morning. I remember one guy had this beat up, rusted out F-250 with all of his welding gear in the back and an Alaska inspection sticker on it and a bumper sticker from Alaska which said, "Don't eat the yellow snow." So these guys were just amazing. I mean, you couldn't really talk to them any more than you can talk to a rock star at a concert. You just kind of get out of their way, make sure they had everything they needed, and not do anything to piss them off. Well, years later, 20 years into this Alcoholics Anonymous experience that I'm having, I figured out that we have that same bargain with management. If you'll forgive me for calling my higher power management, I'll go on to make that point. Now, management knew it had a problem with men and women who just couldn't drink like ordinary people, that we all suffered from a kind of insanity called the insanity of the first drink, which means that whenever we take the first drink, something inside of us says, oh, this is fine, I can drink like an ordinary person. And then we're right back to it. And you hear that story again and again in Alcoholics Anonymous, how people just forgot that they couldn't drink like an ordinary person. That's the insanity of the first drink. Well, God had tried for thousands of years to address the needs of those people who couldn't drink like ordinary people. And especially starting in like the 19th century in America, there was one movement after another, and finally, working with Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob, it must have occurred to management, okay, I can't do it without these guys. I've got to make whatever deal I need to make with these guys so that they will just show up and help each other. And that's how we're like the X-ray welders, because we've got this special bargain with management. Now, where is this bargain laid out most clearly? It's in the third sentence of the third step prayer. It says to management, take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. So let's consider how many players there are in the little drama of that one sentence. And yeah, I am borrowing from Kenneth Burke's analysis, which he calls dramatism for this. I met Burke. I used to drink with Burke. Now, so the players in that sentence are the alcoholic who say in the prayer, the higher power to which the prayer is addressed, but most importantly is those I would help. So those are the three players. Now, notice that the sentence says those I would help. That is a very conscious use of, yeah, that's right, Sarah, the subjunctive mood. It doesn't say that I have to help anybody, that I've already helped anybody, but if I just show up and bear witness that God will take an interest in me and God will take away my difficulties. And that's how it works. It's as simple as that. And what I've seen over a course of 30 years is when people show up and take care of their end of the bargain, things tend to work out really well. And when they quit showing up, when they say, I don't need AA anymore, well, they're forgetting how the bargain works. The bargain is not about me needing AA. The bargain is about management providing this oil patch where I need to show up and bear witness. And as long as I do that, management will take away my difficulties. So, you see, management has self-interest in that. Just like when I worked in the oil patch. The self-interest management had there is that the goddamn equipment wouldn't blow up and kill the engineers. And the self-interest that God has in us is that He can't help alcoholics without our help. He tried and tried and tried and tried. But it takes other alcoholics to help alcoholics. And that's what our history tells us. Now, I'm going to take a minute and look at my clock. One of the things I want to do now is to dive into the 12 and 12, to let the newcomer know that there's this wonderful, wonderful, almost a revision or reinterpretation of the big book that was actually written by Bill Wilson. And the writing in it, and the last time I checked, I think I was the only person who would say this from a podium, is brilliant writing. And one of the things that Wilson does is he uses a mid-century aesthetic in constructing sentences. And I'm going to read 3 of these passages for you this morning. And when I am reading these passages, I want you to listen for the parallel structures and think about parallel lines stretching off into the distance, like in Dodger Stadium, or in terms of mid-century tableware. I'm thinking of Wright, but I'm blanking on his first name, who designed the American Modern line. No, not Frank Lloyd Wright. No. I don't think it was Richard Wright. Okay, so, and I want you to think of great highway interchanges with these beautiful, graceful flyovers coming in from the right and the left. That's what I want you to think about. Now, the first one I'm going to read is very close to the end of the Step 12 chapter. And I want you to listen for the 8 parallel points. And this passage is a single sentence. So what was Wilson thinking about when he would put together sentences like this? Now, he's introducing this by saying not many of us can be leaders of prominence. Here it starts. Service gladly rendered, obligations squarely met, troubles well accepted or solved with God's help, the knowledge that at home or in the world outside, we are partners in a common effort, the well-understood fact that in God's sight all human beings are important, the proof that love freely given surely brings a full return, the certainty that we are no longer isolated and alone in self-constructed prisons, the surety that we need no longer be square pegs in round holes, but can fit and belong in God's scheme of things. These are the permanent and legitimate satisfactions of right living, for which no amount of pomp and circumstance, no heap of material possessions could possibly be substitutes. Now that's a sentence that just demands to be read over and over again, because Wilson is listing 8 permanent and legitimate satisfactions of right living. And it provides a checklist for those of us who are 30-odd years sober, 2 or 3 years sober, to run through that to see if we are experiencing these satisfactions of right living, and if we're not, to double down on our programs, to find a new sponsor, to find a new meeting, but to reapply ourselves, knowing that God will take away our difficulties. Now, I'm going to back up just a few pages. We're still in the same chapter. And here, the parallel points, and there are 11 of them here, are now posed as questions. This is no longer one sentence, but still it has that mid-century modernist appeal of one horizontal structure in parallel to others. Now comes the biggest question yet, and here it is, but it's not one question. What about the practice of these principles in all our affairs? Can we love the whole pattern of living as eagerly as we do the small segment of it we discover when we try to help other alcoholics achieve sobriety? Can we bring the same spirit of love and tolerance into our sometimes deranged family lives that we bring to our AA group? Can we have the same kind of confidence and faith in those people who have been infected and sometimes crippled by our own illness that we have in our sponsors? Can we actually carry the AA spirit into our daily work? Can we meet our newly recognized responsibilities to the world at large? And can we bring new purpose and devotion to the religion of our choice? Can we find a new joy of living in trying to do something about all these things? Furthermore, how shall we come to terms with seeming failure or success? Can we now accept and adjust to either without despair or pride? Can we accept poverty, sickness, loneliness, and bereavement with courage and serenity? Can we steadfastly content ourselves with the humbler yet sometimes more durable satisfactions when the brighter, more glittering achievements are denied us? Okay, so that was introduced as being a question. It turns into 11 questions, and then the next sentence says, the answer is yes. So again, I want you to consider what you think Wilson is up to there. I think a big part of it is he's just trying to be beautiful, as we all are, as any good writer wants to be. I'm just going to do one more of these. Here we have 6 statements from the very beginning of that same chapter. And yeah, all of that happens in the same chapter, but it happens all the way through this book. Now, these are statements that begin a man or he. So just listen to these and count them along the way. When a man or a woman has a spiritual awakening, the most important meaning of it is that he has now become able to do, feel, and believe that which he could not do before on his unaided strength and resources alone. He has been granted a gift which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being. He has been set on a path which tells him he is really going somewhere, that life is not a dead end, not something to be endured or mastered. In a very real sense, he has been transformed because he has laid hold of a source of strength which, in one way or another, he had hitherto denied himself. He finds himself in possession of a degree of honesty, tolerance, unselfishness, peace of mind, and love, of which he had thought himself quite incapable. What he has received is a free gift, and yet usually, at least in some small part, he has made himself ready to receive it. Now, this is a time at which, by this time, all of you have wondered, gosh, is he just interested in the style of those sentences, or is he interested in actually what they mean? Is he a man who's more interested, that is Paul Hunter, a man more interested in the frame than the picture? More interested in the highway than in the beauty of the wilderness it bisects? And I admit to not wishing to draw a distinction between style and substance. In understanding Bill Wilson and the program that he and the founders and God gave to us, there is a tremendous desire to be beautiful. And I think that's a very important part of AA. And you may not follow me down that road, but at 32 years, it really is important to me that I keep finding new layers, and my consciousness continues to be transformed by the brilliant writing of this man, Bill Wilson. Going to look at my watch one more time. Yeah, it's time to wrap up. Nobody who knows me knows that I would be anything like the man I am had I not married well above my station 30 years ago. I just, I heard her tell her story at an AA meeting, I think, and I said, well, I'm going to marry that girl. And I'll share something with any of you out there who are still single. She invited me to a party at her house, which was just amazing. I couldn't believe she had done that. And I deliberately left my sunglasses behind so that I would have an excuse to call her the next day. So God allows us moments of dishonesty when there is a greater good. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you.